Welcome back to Hannity. So a good friend of the show, Sheriff David Clarke, he made waves when he called out the hypocrisy of the mainstream media over fake news, tweeting, quote, "Fake news was born in August 2014 in Ferguson, Missouri, when the MSNBC, mainstream media, the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN all propagated the hands up, don't shoot lie." Now, here are just a few examples that he mentioned. Take a look.
Outrage in Ferguson, Missouri today after police shot and killed an unarmed teenager Saturday afternoon in broad daylight.
The kid body jerked as if he was hit from behind, and he turned around and he puts his hands up like this, and the cop continued to fire until he just dropped down to the ground and his face just smacks the concrete.
So when he turned and faced him and put his hands up, was he standing still at that point?
Yes.
Thousands of Americans are marching in New York and Washington and across the country, demanding a justice system that applies the same to everybody and honors our values. And we want you to know that our hearts are out there marching with them.
Oh, they all had their hands up. Don't shoot. All this began when the mainstream media took the word of Michael Brown's friend when he gave his version of the shooting that day back in 2014. Watch this.
His weapon was already drawn when he got out the car. He shot again, and once my friend felt that shot, he turned around and he put his hands in the air, and he started to get down, but the officer still approached with his weapon drawn, and he fired several more shots, and my friend died.
Joining us now, Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke, trial attorney, political commentator Eric Guster. That was the guy that was with Michael Brown, Sheriff, when he robbed and intimidated the clerk before they were confronted by the police officer. Isn't that true? And then the media took that lie and they ran with it without any fact checking. There were a number of people in the trial that ended up, or when they had the grand jury, that ended up saying didn't happen that way. They said he charged the officer, he engaged the officer, tried to take the officer's gun. And that's why Darren Wilson was never indicted, right?
Well, it's why I said, Sean, that fake news has a birthplace and a birth day, August 9th, 2014, when this widely held false belief of hands up, don't shoot was propagated by the media. They went down there and fit their narrative. Think about what happened off that fake news, Sean. It changed America. This anti-police sentiment rose out of this. This, what I call the bastard child of hands up, don't shoot, Black Lives Matter, grew out of this thing. It swept the country. There are people to this day, Sean, who believe that Mike Brown had his hands up and was walking away with his back turned to Darren Wilson when Darren Wilson shot and killed him. In fact, we all know that's a lie. And only one Washington Post writer had the character, had the integrity to admit that it was a lie. I think it was Jonathan Capehart is his name, who wrote an op-ed and said, yeah, we got hoodwinked on that thing. It was embarrassing for this industry, and he had the courage to do it. But to this day, no other media outlet has done it.
No, Eric, you do know that that never happened, right? You're not arguing that hands up, don't shoot actually happened, are you?
I'm not arguing that hands up, don't shoot ever happened.
Because
but what David Clarke is trying to, no, it did not happen. But what David Clarke is saying is the dumbest thing I've heard on TV since Florida said they were going to be Bama. What he's claiming is the hands up, don't shoot movement was the beginning of fake news sites. The Onion was started in 1988, which is the premier fake news site.
Eric, that's a satire site.
It is fake. It is a fake news site that some people think is real.
But in a serious sense, that false narrative was perpetrated by NBC, by ABC, by CBS, by CNN, by the New York Times, and
they came out and said it was a lie.
Hang on a second. And irresponsibly, they advanced a narrative where people were regurgitating it, and then as a result, a certain expectation was raised. And then when the black eyewitnesses testified before that grand jury, it wasn't the outcome that people expected. And what happened, Eric, as a result of their irresponsible reporting? What happened?
A lot of people fell for that. But all those media sites, all those NBC, MSNBC, all of those sites, CNN, all those stations came out and said, all of them did. They said that was a lie. I've said it was a lie. So let's not.
I don't remember them saying it was a lie. I don't remember a big apology saying we were wrong and we falsely reported from a guy that robbed up a store and intimidated a clerk. Sheriff Clarke.
They did say that was not true. They did. No, let me finish. They did say that was not true. And for you to say, for Clarke to claim that that was the beginning of fake news is the most ridiculous thing.
Sheriff Clarke. Sheriff, you want to respond?
Well, it's fine. It might be ridiculous, but I'll tell you what, we have dead cops because of that hands up, don't shoot lie. We had 2 in New York. We also had 5 in Dallas and some in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, people who were trying to avenge for the life of Mike Brown, who was a thug. Here's another thing they left out of that story.
Been 11
Mike
cops
Brown had just strong-armed a convenience store clerk who was half his size. That is a felony in every state in America. And he also tried to disarm a law enforcement officer. That's how serious this was. It might sound dumb to you, but there are dead cops because of that fake news story out of Ferguson, Missouri. And Eric, I resent that coming from you.
No, your theory is dumb. Someone attacking cops is a personal thing to me. I do not want anyone to assault, harm, or kill cops.
Then don't make irresponsible comments from the media that suggest something that never, excuse me, they advanced a false narrative, a lie. And as a result of the lie, people believed it. And a certain expectation increased in people in terms of what the outcome would be as a result of the lie that it was all predicated on. That's the problem.
But the truth is,
Eric,
no, the truth is,
let me help you out here. The only people who believe the Onion are
Ferguson,
liberals, because
there were
liberals don't
many
critically think
of African Americans being
susceptible to nonsense,
being harassed
and all they can
by
do
police,
is
and the
parrot
civil rights
last word,
division.
Sheriff.
No, the Civil Rights Division stated that
last word, Sheriff. Let the sheriff have the last word.
Fine, thank you, Sean. Again, fake news, you know, most people can figure it out. It might last a day or two, but the hands up, don't shoot fake news out of Ferguson, Missouri continues to this day, and cops are still being killed across this country based off of that fake news story.
All right, we got to leave it there. Thank you both.
Mark Lamont Hill and Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke, thanks for coming on. Sheriff Clarke, this is horrific what happened, obviously, but do you think it is fair to link this murder to the Black Lives Matter movement when we still don't know the suspect's motive?
I think it's very fair in light of the anti-cop rhetoric that is sweeping the United States of America, fueled by this group, some of the vulgar, vile, vicious rhetoric that's coming out, talking about killing cops, and that's just some of the nice stuff, some of the stuff I can't even say here on TV. But there is no doubt in my mind that the 2 New York officers, Ramos and Lou, who were gunned down by an individual who made Facebook postings about wanting to kill pigs, and he was going to go out and hunt officers down. There have been officers across the United States who've had their cruisers shot at and struck while they patrolled. St. Louis, the same thing. Yes, this is part of a pattern now, and you'd have to stick your head in the sand to think that this thing here wasn't fueled by this vile, vulgar, slimy movement.
Mark?
I disagree with your characterization of BLM, but I'd be curious to ask you, do you think that every cop who's been killed this year is connected somehow, the death is connected to BLM?
No, but there's an increase in assaults on police officers, the killings of police officers that may not be directly related to this movement, but you know what, there's no fear anymore about assaulting or attacking, fighting, disarming, or generally, like I said, assaulting law enforcement officers. And you know what, if the shoe fits, wear it. Just like the Dylan Roof, right, who went into a church and slaughtered 9 churchgoers and every white person in America by this Black Lies movement, L-I-E-S, was indicted because of that, and other people came out and talked about slavery, discrimination, alive and well in the United States. Well, that's why I said if the shoe fits here, wear it.
Right. I'm glad that you're saying if the shoe fits, because as a police officer, I would hope you would want to emphasize things like probable cause, due suspicion, investigation. The police officials...
Darren Wilson didn't get that, Mark. You know that. The officers in the Freddie Gray case did not get that assumption of innocence. So for you to stand up and throw that out now, it's
Sheriff, I haven't said all right, I'll let you finish.
It's hypocritical.
All right.
It's hypocritical. The police officers in the Freddie Gray case didn't get that presumption of innocence.
All right, I've let you speak the entire
Darren
segment. Just let
Wilson
me
didn't
respond.
get that presumption of innocence.
Please let me respond. By law, we're entitled to a presumption of innocence. Even if you think that those people didn't get what they deserved, as a police officer, I hope you wouldn't say, well, two wrongs make a right. If anything, we should be emphasizing due process and investigation here. And in this case, the people handling the case in Texas themselves have said very clearly, we don't know the motive. So you're essentially saying that your colleagues in law enforcement who say we don't know the motive are wrong and that you do know the motive. The second piece I want to say is that your characterization of Black Lives Matter is absolutely incorrect. The argument of Black Lives Matter is not to say that police officers should be killed, that police officers should be demonized, that police officers should be marginalized. The argument of Black Lives Matter is that police officers should be held to standards of accountability just like everybody else, and the increased number of black bodies, or the sustained number of black bodies which die at the hands of state violence, needs to end. It means that while we regard all lives, we cannot exclude black lives.
What about the black victims that die at the hands of other black people? That doesn't seem to matter. And they're dying by the thousands, not by the few rare instances of the police use of force.
But let me ask you this, Sheriff Clarke. I mean, just looking at the numbers here, if we're going to bring that up, there were 24 unarmed African Americans killed by police this year. That's according to the Washington Post. So when you take that into account, Sheriff Clarke, do you think that African Americans, people part of this protest, have a right to have their voices heard and to protest?
It's not a matter of whether they have a right. It's a matter of whether it's legitimate. There are 104 homicides in the city of Milwaukee right now. I think there were 79 last year. Baltimore, 214. They've already matched all of 2014. So when you want to take that 24, I'm not saying that that none of that is legitimate in terms of taking a look at them, but how many of them were ruled justifiable? How many of the uses of force were determined to be reasonable and justifiable? And then let's compare that 24 to the number of stops made by police officers during that time period, and you'll find that that is a very, very fractional percentage of deaths that occur at the hands of police officers. That's what the data shows anyway.
I've been pretty active, both following, covering, and as a protester being engaged in these struggles, and I've never seen anyone in the Black Lives Matter movement or any other principled movement against police violence say that most police stops result in unlawful executions or unlawful shootings or even unlawful violence. The argument is that it happens too often, and when it does, we don't have sufficient mechanisms of accountability. Let me finish.
What's too often?
Let me finish. Well, anytime someone gets killed unlawfully or a police officer acts as judge, jury, and executioner, it's too many. I would hope you would agree that even one would be too many. But we've seen dozens of them.
Well, that's a mischaracterization right there, that every time a law enforcement officer has to use force, they're acting as judge, jury, and executioner.
I didn't say that. I did not say that.
Let's apply the facts of the case to the rule of law.
Okay.
And if the rule of law
but Sheriff, I didn't say that.
gives the benefit of the doubt to the officer.
You're just making arguments here, and I didn't say that. What I said is, under the circumstances when that is the case, one is too many. I didn't say that every time it happens, that's the case. I'm saying under the circumstances.
Emotion and anecdote are not facts, Mark.
They're not anecdotes. They're strong evidence here. The problem is police officers are the overseers, and so you all decide what cases are legitimate and which ones aren't. That in and of itself is a problem, and that's what we're trying to deal with.
And by the way, though, just to give the other side of the stats, Sheriff Goforth is the 25th officer, person in uniform killed just this year. 24 unarmed black men. He is the 25th officer to be killed. Way too many on both sides.
No,
I think
it's not the same thing,
we can all agree.
If being black and outside presents the same danger as being a police officer who signs up for a dangerous job, that's pretty scary. Can you imagine if just being black entitles to the same?
Like
nobody should die. Nobody. No, that's
defenseless.
I think we all agree nobody should die.
Nobody should die. You're just playing to the cheap seats. Nobody should die.
Lamont Hill, David
I didn't
Clarke,
sign up for that, and I don't send men and women out every day to serve their communities to end up with that as the result.
I hope not.
Thank you, guys. We really appreciate it. Thanks. Out front.